This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenawalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host Mara Donnelly. Why, Mara, Mother's Day is coming up here shortly.
It is.
And you doing anything special?
I'm going to surprise my mom and go home, but if she sees the show, it won't be a surprise anymore, so.
Well,
to Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Well, we hope that all the mothers out there have a great holiday. And we have a special show for you for Mother's Day and for this spring season. As we see spring coming, we tend to go out and spend more time on the roads and take some family trips. And who better to talk about this than our guest from several weeks ago, and that is Bob Latham. Bob, you are the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Contractors, and we're happy to have you back with us.
That's good to see you, Charlie and Maura.
We had talked about some of the things that were happening in Pennsylvania transportation last time you were on, and since you were on last time, we seem to have made some progress, and we find that Governor Corbett and his Secretary of Transportation have announced that this year we're going to be spending an additional $600 million, and we're going to have 250 extra bridge and highway projects that we wouldn't have had otherwise. I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about what's happened since you were with us and our viewers last
Well,
time.
certainly the passage of Act 89, as it's known now, the comprehensive transportation funding bill, probably one of the most crowning bipartisan achievements of the Pennsylvania General Assembly in Harrisburg, working with Governor Corbett, working with leaders of the legislature on both sides of the aisle, and votes from legislators on both sides of the aisle. It's something you don't see much anymore, and we were happy to be a part of that. And the good news is that we suffered through a rather long and harsh winter. If we had not passed that bill, I shudder to think what we were going to be looking at in terms of conditions of the roads coming into this spring. So I think the viewers can be rest assured that a lot of that damage from winter is going to be fixed. And in addition to projects throughout the state which are going to improve safety, economic development and quality of life, and also other modes, not just highways. The first thing that's going to be attacked is the condition of the roads, so people have smoother, safer roads to ride on this year.
Well, you've also brought another guest with you, and we're happy to have the Secretary with us. We have Brad Mallory with us. Brad, welcome to the show. You were the Secretary of Transportation under Governor Tom Ridge, and currently you're the Executive Deputy Secretary of Transportation under Governor Corbett. So you have seen your way around the Transportation Department. How would you rank where we are now with where we were in the Ridge years? How are we doing?
We were fortunate due to some increase, a small increase in state funding during the Ridge administration and a significant increase in federal funding to be able to dramatically improve road conditions over those 8 years of the Ridge-Schweiker administration. And our national average for pavement smoothness, we got above the national average for the first time ever. And we stabilized bridge conditions. But my timing was good in a sense, insofar as just about the time I left office, inflation reared its ugly head again, costs started to escalate, and the age curve of Pennsylvania's bridges started to catch up with us. The average age of a bridge, in fact, in Pennsylvania today, as we sit here, is 51 years, and the average design life of a bridge is 50 years. So if you're looking at a bridge in Pennsylvania, odds are it's beyond its intended useful life. Wow. So what happened was the conditions started to deteriorate. And in an effort to just hold the system together, they started to engage in triage, to use a medical term. And they were taking money that previously might have been spent on the pavement, keeping that smoothness where people liked it, and put it almost entirely into the bridge system. I'm not criticizing that decision. If your bridges are going to fall down, you have to do what you have to do. But we're seeing that in dramatic relief, stark relief in us right today with the pothole situation. Because of that, our bridges are in better shape than they would have been, but our pavements, due to this harsh winter, are in terrible condition. The good news is this additional funding is going to allow both the bridges and the pavements to be fixed. We don't have to make that awful choice, the choice no mother ever wants to make, which one of their children they like better, right? And in addition to that, the governor and the legislature, in the bipartisan fashion that Bob talks about, went way beyond that in terms of solving funding problems for mass transit and rail freight and aviation and the other modes, all the things that are necessary for Pennsylvania's economy to function. So as proud as I am of what we did in the Ridge administration, this is a dramatic increment above that. And I don't think Tom Ridge would mind anybody saying that.
Well, it was long overdue, and I think
Precisely.
you've pointed out before, both of you pointed out before, that it was, we were digging ourselves out of a hole, a pothole, no pun intended, but this is really kind of a tough time of year to drive around, because I find myself, gripping the wheel and praying not to hit potholes, so this is very exciting news. Now, I know we've talked in the past about some of the high-profile projects. There's been some press about some of the bridges and the type of shape they were in. But there's actually a lot of low-profile, what I call low-profile stuff going on that's going to be part of this funding, that it's going to help improve traffic flow. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the things we may not even notice that are happening with regard to our daily commutes.
Well, I think that what you can see, what you will see is, as I said, a lot of resurfacing going on. That'll be very helpful. Each one of PennDOT's districts, and they're broken into 11 districts across the state, has a list of the projects that they're going to be doing. And I'm very impressed to notice that many of them are safety projects. So you're talking about straightening out curves that are dangerous, and these aren't necessarily big ticket items. Removing obstacles to the side of the road, better delineation on the center lane, and these are just little things that save lives. It's been proven to save lives. We've seen, for example, that roadway conditions like that can contribute to fatalities in industries every bit as much as lack of seatbelt use or DUI. So these are the kind of things that you're going to see. The other thing is, and I'll let Brad talk about this, is the department is looking at a myriad of ways to be more efficient and move traffic more efficiently that doesn't require capacity adding projects. Maybe you want to talk about some of the signalization and other things you're going to be doing.
That's very true. Once again, when you're faced with those kind of triage decisions, you don't spend money on the things that are really nice, that could make our lives easier and simple. You spend the money on things you absolutely positively have to. So, for example, another thing that has gone long unfunded in Pennsylvania are intersection improvements and signalization. How many times have you been driving to and from work or going to a social event or wherever, just traveling, and said to yourself, these traffic lights can't be right? And the odds are...
Are you in the back of my car?
Yeah, just about every day.
And the odds are they weren't right.
Yeah.
Their timing is off. They're perhaps antiquated. This funding mechanism established by this act will enable a dramatic improvement, computerization and signalization improvements all across the Commonwealth in cooperation with local governments, who oftentimes bear the responsibility for these improvements, but they don't have a way to pay for them either. What that means is, with the same amount of highway capacity, you will get, in the highway engineer's term, more throughput. What that means to you and I is you won't be sitting there wondering why you're stopped at a light for no apparent reason. The traffic will be much more smoothly.
Nothing makes me crazier.
All of us, all of
Really,
us.
yeah.
That's just an example. But the pavement smoothness, to Bob's point, matters as well. I mean, if pavement conditions deteriorate significantly enough, you're actually facing safety issues, not to mention the wear and tear on your automobile. So I think that the cumulative safety effect of this bill will be quite dramatic, and it won't just be in urban areas, and it won't just be on the state-owned system. This funding mechanism, once again, sends significant dollars to local governments in their highway system, which has been grossly underfunded for decades. So you will see similar improvements on the local system. That's what I mean by the breadth and extent of this package, and frankly, why I'm so impressed by what's been accomplished.
You actually raise a great point. There's this trickle-down effect as well with these improvements and these safety improvements. And this time of year is when the news starts doing the stories about the damage to people's cars and how much it's going to cost them. And that's one of the costs that we don't often look at, but it's going to save the average person money in terms of wear and tear on their car when this is ultimately fixed. So that's a great point. So tell us a little bit about how we can know that this money is going to be spent wisely.
Well, that's excellent. That's an excellent question.
Because sometimes when you throw a lot of money at a problem, sometimes you wonder, is it being spent wisely?
The key to that is not doing business as usual. For example, you've heard some call for the consolidation of the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission and PennDOT.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that's going to happen, but there are some things that the department is doing in cooperation with the Turnpike Commission that will save a lot of money. The other is in cooperation with local governments, again attacking the bridge problem that Brad was talking about. We're going to be able to look at bridges in a very tight geographic area. Now, first of all, when you drive over a bridge, does it identify itself as being owned by PennDOT or the county or the municipality? No. And do you really care? No. You just want it to be functional.
Yeah.
The financial challenges that the counties and local governments are facing are going to be met under a program called bundling. And Brad, maybe you can talk a little bit about that and how you're going to be using economies of scale to save money there.
You know, at the very outset, you don't go and ask for more funding for something unless you're putting your own house in order first. That's just a fundamental obligation of government. We have saved and redirected roughly $100 million from what would have been overhead into road work by cutting cost, by productivity improvement. $100 million. Wow. And that continues apace. And people need to insist, and I mean this quite sincerely, that we continue to do that. But of course, it goes way beyond that. Bob mentioned bridge bundling. With Pennsylvania's huge bridge situation, huge bridge problems still remaining, we realized that business as usual wasn't going to get it done. And so we began bundling bridges, both ourselves at the state level and both offering the same to local governments. So instead of doing every one of these bridge projects as a one-off, we're going to be putting them together in packages and bidding them in packages and gaining economies of scale, allowing contractors and consulting engineers to really supply the wisdom and their experience and get a return on that wisdom and experience far beyond what we get with a simple, everyday, low bid savings. That's a great system. It served us very well. It continues to serve us well. But we can do a little more with it. This bridge bundling will do it. And finally, people just have to insist, and they will see, that these pavements get fixed, that bridge posting is removed and they don't have the detour anymore, and that the bypass they've waited 30 or 40 years for finally gets built. That's the proof is in the pudding.
The other thing that was included in Act 89 that did get some notoriety, and your viewers would be interested in, is some reforms in what we call the prevailing wage system. And that is where local government projects that have set wages were at a very low level. Now that threshold was increased so that prevailing wages will apply on less projects, and that'll be particularly helpful for local governments in saving money.
Mm-hmm. And here we are. We have to say this to you again, Bob. We've just started to scratch the surface, and we're running out of time. In the last 30 seconds, though, I'll throw the question up to either one or both of you, and that is, this extra funding has also saved 12,000 construction jobs, hasn't it? And will generate another 50,000 jobs in related industries. Is that true?
I think the important thing to note is exactly that, is that the 50,000 jobs that are going to be created by this are not just necessarily all in construction. They're across the economy. Brad mentioned the multimodal fund. We're going to be We're going to be doing work at ports, freight rail, all types of modes. That'll boost the economy. That'll help businesses decide that they're going to locate here in Pennsylvania. And it's going to have an economic benefit to everybody.
Well, I'm looking at Maura's sheet. Maura has 10 questions
I know.
she wants to ask you.
She only checked off a couple.
we have to have you back very soon. And we want to thank you both for being with us today. We'll be back with our second segment of Behind the Headlines right after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The Council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions to make the Commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States, and by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by Penn Waste, your best local choice for your waste removal and recycling needs.
Hi, welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. In this segment, I'm joined by Mr. Ed Arnold, who's the chairman of Susquehanna Valley Center. Ed, welcome back to the show.
Good to see you, Charlie.
It's nice to see you again for another segment of the Arnold Report. And on this Arnold Report, what we want to do, I think, is focus on one issue. We've had 3 communications in the last week from almost panicked investors, and they are saying we invested everything heavily in stocks. Stocks have traditionally been the best source of wealth and wealth accumulation in America, and we're very concerned now. What should we do? Now, I think let's answer that at the end of this Arnold Report segment. But I think these particular concerns have been fueled by the uncertainty in the international financial markets caused by the Ukraine. Would you agree that this panic is caused by the Ukraine, or are there other factors that are figuring in as well?
What we want to talk about here is the importance of Ukraine, but more so the importance of Russia, because obviously the conflict is, should there be major sanctions, and in fact, and therefore in turn, would Russia therefore retaliate with major embargoes of their mineral wealth? And this is a definite effect on the economic health of the world.
Well, we find that there was a book that was written a number of years ago by a great man by the name of Reinhold Niebuhr, a political theorist and political philosopher, and it was called The Children of Light and the Children of Darkness. And he said there's 2 types of leaders. There are the children of light who believe in talking and negotiations, and they don't really believe that military force has any role in international diplomacy. And then there are the children of darkness who do believe that military force has a role in diplomacy. And what he's saying is we really need someone with the idealism of the children of light and with the wisdom of the children of darkness, someone that has prudence, someone in the middle. And we find that here in the Ukraine, we have Mr. Putin, who's clearly a child of darkness, President Obama, who's clearly a child of light, and right now, the children of darkness are winning, I think, in terms of what's going on there. Crimea has been annexed back into Russia, and we look at the events that are occurring there, and it looks like major portions of the Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine at least, will be annexed as well. What do you think?
Well, I think one thing, we've got to look a little bit at the history of Ukraine. One simple statement made by, I'm not exactly sure whom, a house divided against itself cannot stand, or one cannot rule a house divided. Well, that was Ukraine. Ukraine is 2 cultures. The eastern Ukraine speaks Russian, western Ukraine speaks Ukrainian. Eastern Ukraine is Russian Orthodox, western Ukraine is Catholic. The country has had two leaders, and they're going back and forth because the one represents the west and one represents the east, and they've been in constant turmoil. And neither leader is particularly enlightened, so they're really history of a successful democracy, realizing Ukraine, 700 years was part of the Russian Empire. It's only the last 20-some years that it is a free and independent country. That it is very dependent, very attached to Russia. I mean, 100% of its energy comes from Russia. Its trade, overwhelming majority is with Russia. Its iron ore mines, a simple thing, all their ore goes to Russia for smeltering. I mean, they are definitely attached to, and eastern Ukraine, historically, is something between 25 and 50%, depending upon the area, is Russian descendants. And this idea of your descendants is very important to them. We are one of the few melting pots in the world, we're becoming less all the time. So basically, we got to look at what are they and what is their world. And the fact is that Ukraine is an extremely unstable country, very, very attached to Russia. So overall, what will happen? Well, we know there's going to be another election sometime in May, and probably the eastern Ukraine will vote, just like the Crimea, to become part of Russia. Should we be...
Just like Crimea.
Just like Crimea.
Yeah.
Should we, in fact, react? That's a big question mark. Should the U.S., should Europe? Well, really, it's more of a Europe, so Europe should lead, not us. And of course, then we have that simple...
And here we have Ukraine divided, just like Libya was divided between East and West. So Ukraine is divided between East and West by religions and by language.
I mean, almost this cultural thing, it's almost like a tribal. They're different nation. Why they're one, I'm not quite sure. And therefore, our world leaders, back to your statement, my concern is in the case of Obama, does he understand? The answer is absolutely no. Does he care, question mark, or does he want a crisis because he has done such a bad job as a president, this would take attention from his failures? So I'm not even sure what his goal is in causing economic chaos.
But yeah, this is something that's caused, though, by President Putin. I mean, he's the driver. He's in the seat that's causing things to occur the way they are.
But basically, because of our weakness and our lack of coherence with our allies, he has seen a definite weakness in the Western world.
I think that's right.
And basically because America is no longer leading, and Europe is, again, doing their self-interest thing, and they are divided with all the challenges in the Euro community. So they're trying to get economic stability. And the one thing we can say, is the financial community prepared for chaos? And the answer is absolutely no. It is totally, somehow it feels everything's going to be happy in the future.
And this is something that we've talked about privately before. You believe that there's a disconnect between our political leadership and our economic leadership, and they don't understand one another, and they don't understand each other's subject matter as well. Is that true?
Well, I think this is basically a history of our major conflicts. I mean, World War I and World War II were both an economic disaster. And the attitude was in those countries, because of world trade and because of interdependence, we'll never have a major war. Well, obviously they were wrong, because the economic people said, gee, the politicians should understand this. The politicians didn't understand it, because politics is about power, not about economics. And so they have a different goal. In the case of Putin, definitely, he is all about power, and so is Obama. He wants to continue to rule the country. So both of them are in a position of power, and neither of them are really that concerned about economics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's true that the one thing is military force can change political, social, and economic systems overnight in the blinking of an eye. So what do you think Putin's next move might be here, Ed?
Well, I think that basically there's going to be an election. The people will vote just like the Crimea, that they want to secede from the major Ukraine and become part of Russia.
Do you believe that he wants to restore the former Soviet Union?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question that is his ultimate goal. Whether he'll do it as a federation and where he'll have sort of his own euro or common market would be maybe more than actually taking them over. But in the case of Ukraine, he would, again, it's a little question. What is he going to do there? Is he going to actually eliminate their government? Are they going to have their own sort of puppet government controlled by Russia? I think that would be more relevant. That would be the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, in our last almost just under 3 minutes left, what would you tell?
Just one little point I'd like to make.
Sure.
I don't know how many people realize how important Russia is to the world. They are the number one at this point world crude oil producer. They're the number 2 natural gas producer. They're the number 1, 43% of the world's platinum. They're, palladium, 12%. They're number 1 in all these things. In platinum, in chromium, they're 30% of the world's production, number 1. In nickel, they're number 1. Russia is very, very critical.
So their importance to the world and world financial markets is natural resources.
That's correct. And if obviously we go to economic war with them, it will disrupt the world and will create a major, major problem. Back to your statement there, what do you do with your investments? At this particular moment, the best win-win, if there is such a thing in this world, is investing in palladium. And the way to invest in palladium
what is palladium, Ed?
Palladium is a metal that is primarily used in catalytic converters.
Okay.
And the world is polluted, specifically China must address it, which is the world's largest consumer of cars, is going to have to start putting catalytic converters in their cars.
And they'll need palladium.
And they need palladium, which is in short supply now. In fact, the world is producing maybe only 2/3 of its needs, and the other third is from recycling. And a lot of that came from the Russian stockpile, which is very questionable. And of course, in a sanction, it would definitely stop. So overall, if the world goes along peacefully, palladium demand will soar, and there's a short supply of it. So basically, an exchange-traded fund, which is an ETF, would be there's 2 of them, PALL and PPLT. I happen to like PALL. The other I consider win-win thing is a company called Chenery Partners, a CQP. Chenery is going to export natural gas to Japan. They have the contract signed. Their plant isn't quite finished. At this point, they're the only company legally allowed to export natural gas in America. And basically, even though it has gone up tremendously, that's the only question, is it so high right now in this, it yields 5%. It's a special structure, partnership, not part of the main company. So these are 2 areas, and then very frankly, as a real strange hedge, is a Russian ETF, which you look on Google and you can find several of them.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. You've given at least an avenue for them to try to look at and try to recover.
Cash may still be your number 1 thing.
Okay. We want to thank you for being with us, Ed. We're going to keep our eye on what's going on in Ukraine and those world financial markets and how they affect you. And we hope that you will be back with us again next week to watch another episode of Behind the Headlines. We'll see you then.